For all the splendor and glitter that the British monarchy projects to the world, its true foundation has always rested on one word: duty. At Windsor Castle, that very principle was being honored in the most spectacular way. Princess Anne's historic 20,000th engagement. A record unmatched, a lifetime carved from grit, discipline, and service. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a moment of unity in a family so often tested by storms. But what unfolded instead shocked even the seasoned courtiers who have seen everything. A single, careless remark, spoken not by a senior royal, but by Laura Lopes, Queen Camilla's daughter, struck at the heart of Princess Anne's legacy. In an instant, the polished harmony of the ceremony cracked, and all eyes turned to one man: Prince William. To the world, William is the heir, the steady hand waiting in the wings. But to Anne, he is something deeper, a nephew who grew up admiring her iron discipline, a man who learned the meaning of service by watching her endure decades of duty without complaint. And on that night, when her honor was questioned, William's fury broke through the royal mask. Stay with us, because what followed was not just family drama. It was a battle over loyalty, respect, and the soul of the monarchy itself. And before we dive deeper, make sure to like this video and subscribe to The Royal Elite, your front row seat to the hidden truths behind royal life. At Windsor Castle, the air was thick with reverence. The chandeliers glimmered, violins filled the room with quiet grace, and every guest understood they were witnessing history. Princess Anne, the most tireless royal of her generation, being celebrated for reaching an almost mythical number: 20,000 engagements. No one else in the family had ever come close. To those in attendance, this was more than a statistic. It was the living embodiment of duty carried on one woman's shoulders. For decades, Anne has been called the hardest working royal, a woman uninterested in glamour, uninterested in applause, and yet indispensable to the monarchy's survival. On this night, her service was meant to shine brighter than the diamonds in the crown. Guests raised their glasses, conversations hummed with admiration, and William himself stood proudly by, ready to honor the aunt who had shaped his understanding of responsibility. And then, like a crack of thunder on a clear evening, the words slipped from Laura Lopes's lips. Delivered casually, as if in passing, yet sharp enough to cut through the room. Anne's way of doing things feels outdated. It's William and Catherine who bring the fresh energy Britain needs. At first, it felt almost like small talk, but the impact was immediate. The air tightened, smiles faltered. A few guests lowered their glasses mid-toast. For one fleeting second, it seemed the room itself had frozen, because everyone present understood what had just happened. This was not a playful quip. It was a dismissal of Anne's entire legacy, spoken not by the press, not by critics outside the palace walls, but by the Queen's daughter herself. Anne, ever the embodiment of composure, betrayed no emotion. Her posture remained regal, her eyes steady, her lips pressed just a little tighter than usual. To most, it looked like nothing, but to those who knew her best, it was the subtle signal of a woman wounded in silence. And then there was William, the heir who has been trained his entire life to measure his tone, to master restraint, to never let emotion betray the crown. Yet in that moment, the mask slipped, his jaw tightened, his fists clenched, his gaze, sharp and unyielding, locked onto Laura. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence was thunder, his anger palpable, vibrating through the hall. Conversations faltered. Champagne remained untouched. Courtiers prayed silently that the moment would pass. But everyone saw it. William's fury was real, and he would not forget. The morning after the Windsor Castle reception, the palace looked as serene as ever. Guards marched in rhythm, horses clattered against the cobblestones, and the Union Jack fluttered against the autumn sky. But behind closed doors, William's mind was a storm. He had replayed Laura's words over and over throughout the night, each repetition cutting deeper, each memory fueling the fire. For William, it wasn't just about an insult. It was about what that insult represented: the audacity to dismiss the very woman who had carried the monarchy through decades of turbulence. Unable to let it rest, William requested a private audience with Princess Anne at her residence in Gatcombe Park. The setting was modest compared to the grandeur of Windsor. Bookshelves lined with well-worn volumes, photographs of horses and competitions, a quiet reminder of Anne's grounded nature. And there she sat, calm, unshaken, sipping tea as if nothing in the world had shifted. But William's composure broke. His voice, clipped yet firm, carried the weight of a man who had finally drawn a line. "I cannot understand it, Anne. Laura owes everything. Her place, her proximity to this family, to my father's marriage. And yet she dares to belittle you, the hardest working royal of us all. How can we stand by and allow such disrespect to pass unchecked?" Anne's eyes softened, though her tone remained as steady as ever. She set her teacup down and simply replied, "You get used to it, William. People will always think they know what this job should be." For Anne, Laura's remark was just another in a long line of dismissals. A woman overlooked in favor of her brothers, criticized for her bluntness, judged for not being glamorous enough. Anne had endured it all. To her, silence was not weakness, it was survival. But for William, it was unbearable. His loyalty to Anne went beyond affection. It was reverence. As a child, he had watched her compete with grit on horseback. As an adult, he had seen her tirelessly march through endless engagements, never chasing headlines, never seeking praise. And now, to see all of that brushed aside with a careless remark ignited something deeper, outrage mixed with duty. "No, Aunt Anne," William pressed, his tone sharp but respectful. "Silence is not strength here, it's risk. You may choose to bear it, but if her words spread, the world will twist them into a story of division, a generational war inside the monarchy. That's not just an insult to you, that's a threat to all of us." Anne gave a faint smile, the kind only someone battle-hardened could offer. "Perhaps, but sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not to give carelessness more power than it deserves." Yet, William's jaw remained tight, his eyes unyielding. To him, this wasn't about ignoring a comment. This was about defending honor, family, and the crown itself. And in that private room, a divide quietly opened, not between William and Anne, but between two philosophies: the resilience of silence and the fury of loyalty. Word travels fast within palace walls. By the time William had spoken his mind to Anne, whispers of his visible anger at Windsor Castle had already reached Queen Camilla, and her reaction was as predictable as it was fierce. For Camilla, Laura and Tom had always been her softest spot, children she fought to shield from the brutal spotlight that William and Harry had endured since birth. To hear that her daughter had become the target of William's fury struck a raw nerve. She bristled at the suggestion that Laura had crossed a line. To her, it was William who had overreacted, allowing pride to magnify a casual remark into a crisis. King Charles found himself exactly where he dreaded most, trapped between duty and blood. As monarch, his responsibility was to protect the unity of the family, the very image of stability the crown projected to Britain. But, as a father and husband, he understood Camilla's instinct to guard Laura at all costs. Every reconciliation he had worked so carefully to build between his two worlds, his first family and his second, now trembled on the edge of collapse. The effects soon showed in subtle but unmistakable ways. At charity galas, William kept his distance from Camilla. Conversations that were once polite but cordial became clipped, perfunctory. When Laura was present, the tension thickened like smoke in the room. William's eyes would narrow, his jaw tense, while Laura carried herself with defiance, speaking warmly about art exhibitions, laughing with friends, yet betraying the unmistakable pride of someone unwilling to apologize. Guests felt it. They might not have known the details, but they sensed the fracture. Catherine, always the diplomat, tried to bridge the gap, offering smiles to Camilla, steering conversations towards safer topics, but even her grace could not erase the undercurrent. Every seating plan, every guest list now had to be carefully adjusted by palace staff, making sure William and Laura were not placed side by side. Meanwhile, Princess Anne did what she had always done, carried on. She attended engagements, shook hands with donors, and kept her composure. But those closest to her noticed a subtle change. Her shoulders a little heavier, her silences a little longer, as though the sting of Laura's words had sunk deeper than she admitted. To William, this only reinforced his conviction. Silence was not safety. Silence was surrender. And if Anne would not defend herself, then he would. His loyalty demanded it, even if that meant clashing head-on with the woman his father loved. It was in this atmosphere of suspicion and bruised pride that Charles finally acted. He knew the palace could not afford private discord spilling into public scandal, and so he called for a family meeting, a rare and dreaded intervention that would place William, Anne, Camilla, and Laura face to face in a single room. The stage was set for confrontation. The family meeting was called in the understated but heavy silence that only Buckingham Palace could carry. No reporters, no photographers, just a quiet drawing room tucked away from the grand state chambers, chosen precisely because its walls had witnessed centuries of private reckonings. On that day, the room held 5 figures whose relationships were fraying beneath the polished surface of monarchy. King Charles sat at the center, his face lined with the weight of a man who had spent his reign balancing the impossible, being sovereign to a nation and father to a fractured family. To his left, Anne sat with her usual composure, posture straight, eyes calm, as though she were bracing for yet another storm she never asked for. Across from her, William leaned forward, his expression tight, jaw locked, every muscle betraying his determination. Beside him, Catherine sat quietly, her role unspoken but vital, steadying him with her presence. On the other side, Camilla's gaze burned with quiet defiance, her protective arm near Laura, who carried herself with the poise of someone trying to appear unaffected, though pride stiffened every gesture. Charles began softly, almost pleadingly, "We are a family first. Unity is our greatest shield. The monarchy stands only as strong as the ties that bind us together." His words were measured, but his eyes betrayed desperation. It was William who spoke first. His voice was steady, but his conviction thundered. "This is not about a passing comment, Father. This is about respect. Aunt Anne has given more to this crown than anyone in this room. To have her dismissed, even casually, is an insult to her sacrifice and to the monarchy itself." Every syllable carried weight. Catherine watched, knowing this was not just William speaking as a nephew. This was the future king defending the principle of loyalty itself. Laura shifted in her seat, then lifted her chin. "I never meant it as an attack. I was speaking casually. People are reading far too much into my words." William's eyes narrowed. His reply was sharp, but still contained. Intent does not erase impact. Words carry weight, especially when spoken inside this family. If you cannot see that, then you cannot understand what this crown demands. Camilla bristled, her voice rising sharper than Charles expected. "Enough. My daughter has lived her life outside of this madness. She is not a working royal. She should not be dragged into palace politics because of one offhand remark. This is unfair, William." For the first time, Anne broke her silence. Her voice was calm, steady, but tinged with the weariness of a woman who had spent her life weathering storms. "It stung, yes, but we should not let it grow larger than it deserves. There is work to be done, and I would rather we move on." But William shook his head. "No, Aunt. To let this go without acknowledgement is to say that your decades of sacrifice mean nothing. I will not stand by and let that happen." The room fell into heavy silence. Charles exhaled deeply, his hands clasped together. He knew no resolution would come today. His attempt at peace had only revealed how deep the fault lines truly ran. Anne left quietly, as she always did, carrying her dignity with her. William departed, his frustration simmering, convinced that silence was dishonor. Camilla walked out with Laura, her arm tight around her daughter, her pride unshaken, her resentment against William deepened. No reconciliation, no apology. Only an uneasy truce, thin as glass, destined to crack again. In the end, the confrontation at Buckingham was not about Laura's words alone. It was about what those words awakened inside Prince William. To the public, he's often seen as composed, diplomatic, the heir who carries himself with restraint. But beneath that calm exterior lies a man whose sense of loyalty runs deeper than protocol, deeper even than politics. For William, Anne is not just an aunt. She is a living example of duty, someone who worked relentlessly in silence, sacrificing personal comfort for the monarchy's survival. When Laura dismissed her contributions, William did not hear a casual remark. He heard the dismissal of a lifetime of service, the dismissal of the very values that have kept the monarchy standing. This is why his fury was not merely anger, it was defense. A defense of honor, a defense of family, a defense of the crown itself. While Anne chose silence as her armor, William chose confrontation as his weapon. And in that contrast lies a powerful truth. Loyalty wears many faces. One preserves by enduring, the other protects by fighting back. William's decision to stand firm revealed something more than family tension. It revealed the burden of a future king who knows that silence can sometimes be as dangerous as betrayal. To him, loyalty is not passive. It is active, fiery, and unyielding. It means standing tall even when it risks creating rifts, even when it exposes fault lines the monarchy would rather hide. And perhaps that is why this moment matters. Because behind the polished image of royal life, it shows us a man who refuses to let respect be optional, who believes that without honor, there can be no crown. William's fury was not weakness. It was his way of saying, this family may bend, but it will not break on my watch. As the dust settled, nothing in the royal household truly returned to normal. Smiles for the cameras hid the reality of fractured trust. Seating plans were rewritten, conversations shortened, and an invisible barrier remained between William and Camilla's daughter. Anne carried on as she always had, her resilience unbroken, her silence her shield. But William's stance left a mark that would not fade. What began as one casual remark had evolved into a story about far more than family etiquette. It became a test of principles, the weight of respect, the cost of loyalty, and the fragile threads holding together a monarchy built on both tradition and perception. William chose action where others chose silence, and in that choice, he revealed the kind of leader he is becoming: unyielding, protective, and deeply loyal. But this raises a question that lingers long after the palace doors have closed. Was William right to stand firm, refusing to let Anne's sacrifice be diminished? Or was Anne wiser, choosing silence as the stronger path? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop your opinion in the comments below. And if you found this story as revealing as we did, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the Royal Elite, and turn on notifications so you never miss the untold truths behind royal life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter.